This is actually pretty normal, though, because nothing is ever done for our Indigenous women and girls.
Tonight, reaction to the inaction on the one-year anniversary of the National Inquiry's final report.
There's so much mistrust here, and it's generational mistrust.
And calls for major changes in Nunavut after a video of a violent arrest goes viral. Good evening and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Brittany Hobson. It's been 1 year since the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Women and Girls released its final report, and many are left wondering, when will the federal government respond? Maggie SYLLIBOY certainly does. She spoke to APTN's Todd Lamarand, beginning with what she asked Trudeau 3 years ago.
On October 4th, 2017, Maggie SYLLIBOY spoke at an MMIWG rally about her murdered sister Sonia, a 25-year-old unsolved cold case. She spoke to Justin Trudeau just before he, in turn, addressed the crowd.
And I asked him if he would meet with families, that it was very critical and very important that he meet with us. And he said that he would, and he never did.
It's no wonder that she accuses the government of napping, as a year comes and goes without a federal response to the report's calls for justice.
I don't think that the government is really looking at involving the families and involving the people at the grassroots level, because that's where the change really comes.
Meanwhile, in the House, NDP leader JAGMEET SINGH repeatedly asked the Prime Minister about the delay.
Simple question. It's been 1 year since the calls for justice were put forward. Why is the government delaying to respond?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have been acting on those calls for justice over the past year, and we will continue to. The COVID-19 crisis has delayed the work by our partners and us on the response.
SYLLIBOY doesn't buy the Prime Minister's argument, saying they had months to work on a response.
I wish they would just tell us the truth, that they haven't been doing anything. And, you know, there's a long time between, there's 9 months. So there's previous to March, the COVID, from June. What honestly have they been doing?
A year ago, Trudeau was given a sacred bundle containing a copy of the report. SYLLIBOY wonders about it.
Does he have a relationship with that today? Does he look at that bundle? Where is it? Or is it on a shelf collecting dust? That's what I want to know. Where is that bundle?
SYLLIBOY still hasn't given up hope her sister's killer will be found. Last summer's billboard campaign in London, Ontario, generated dozens of tips. Todd Lamarand, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Now to BC, where 2 Indigenous advocates say they're disappointed by the inaction of governments to implement the calls for justice on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls.
This is actually pretty normal, though, because nothing is ever done for our Indigenous women and girls. That was shown during the Wally Opal inquiry, the Truth and Reconciliation, all of these other reports that came out before. Nothing ever gets done.
I think we need to change tactics. You know, I can't see myself supporting another inquiry because they're dead-end streets. And I think we have to become more aggressive. We have to consider class action lawsuits. We have to consider things that bring about real accountability.
And on the 1-year anniversary of the release of the report, many families are still searching for answers on their missing loved ones. Cindy Martin went missing from Hazelton in northern British Columbia in 2018. Lee Wilson brings us her story.
Cindy Martin was last seen on December 23rd, 2018 in Hazelton, British Columbia. Immediately after her disappearance, search parties were conducted but were unsuccessful. She has not been heard from since. Martin's family is still holding out hope, offering a $10,000 reward for information on her safe return. Her sister Sheridan, who lives in Vancouver, shares the difficult time they have faced since the disappearance.
There's been no sign of Cindy. We just don't understand where she disappeared to.
Cindy Martin grew up in Vancouver, but moved to Hazelton to be closer to her mother. Sheridan Martin feels it's important that people don't treat her sister as a statistic.
I want the world to know that these women are human beings. They lived, they breathed, they cried, they felt pain, they felt happiness. My sister Cindy just completed her counseling degree that year.
She was a youth worker and murder and missing Indigenous advocate before going missing. Last year, the family collected with 2 investigators into MMIW. There was no information or leads, but they felt heard. 1 year ago, a national inquiry into the murder and missing Indigenous woman was completed. The family feels there have been words, but no actions.
You know, I was thinking about that today, and there were many recommendations, and as a family member of a murdered, a missing Indigenous woman, I feel that it was just simply a report put forward by Canada, and they're just words. Where are the actions? I want to see actions being produced.
Cindy Martin went missing along the infamous Highway of Tears, Highway 16 that runs from Prince George to Prince Rupert. Since 1969, dozens of women have either vanished or been murdered. The family has talked to police about cameras being installed along the highway for prevention, as well as more awareness in Canada of the Highway of Tears. Cindy Martin's family shared a message of unity to other MMIW families.
I'd just like to say to the other murdered and missing Indigenous women's families that my heart and soul stand with you. I used to do the walks with in Vancouver every February 14th. And you really never understand the depth of pain or loss until you really do lose a family member that goes missing or is murdered.
Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Kitimat.
1 year after the MMIWG final report, some two-spirited people say they were not acknowledged and that the delay of the action plan is contributing to the risk of violence. Angel Moore has this story.
ALAYA McIVOR tested twice, once for her cousin Roberta McIVOR, who was killed in 2011, and then again as a survivor.
I didn't really feel heard. Therefore, there was no empathy, I guess, from the commissioner at that point and at that time.
MARION Buller, the former chief commissioner, says it was critical to include two-spirited people in the inquiry.
The commissioners and I decided that we needed to include 2S people because their experiences were very important.
And she points people to the calls for justice.
I'm somewhat discouraged to hear that people felt that they weren't heard, but I do also encourage them to read the special part of our final report and our calls for justice directed at the concerns that were raised, and I think they will find that they were heard.
There are 32 specific calls for justice for 2 SLGBTQQIA in the final report. John R. SYLLIBOY, the interim executive director at Wabanaki Two-Spirit Alliance, believes the report is more inclusive.
We feel that this report better reflects our presence. Even the wording two-spirited, LGBTQQIA is outrightly spelled everywhere in the report. So that's very important, that that presence is spelled.
There are now feelings of frustrations over the delayed federal government action plan. Ottawa says it's on hold because of COVID-19. McIVOR feels that is an excuse.
Canada needs to really respond to the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and two-spirits with a pandemic response and a pandemic lens, because it has been a pandemic for a number amount of decades, and Canada needs to acknowledge that it's genocide and there's a pandemic there, and it always has been.
Director of Diversity for Montreal Pride, ALICIA TREMBLAY, says the action plan and calls for justice cannot be ignored.
We're often only perceived as, brown bodies, but we're so much more than that. And we're constantly dehumanized in media, in people's conversations, in our workplaces, in schools. So, I'm sorry, it just makes me very emotional. So no, nothing has changed. But when is it going to change? That's the question.
Buller agrees that there needs to be a change as a result of the inquiry.
It's a real slap in the face to families and survivors all across Canada, in my view. I can't necessarily speak for them, but, you know, if I was a family member or a survivor of violence, I'd be really, really angry and calling for change.
Communities are taking their own action. Montreal Pride volunteers attend diversity workshops. Wabanaki Two-Spirit Alliance offers support and education, where SYLLIBOY uses the 231 calls for justice as a guideline.
The report itself is a document that's powerful, but we also know that we can do things on our own, move forward on our own. That's what we're trying to do.
The report says the calls for justice are Canada's human rights obligation. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabukduk, Halifax.
A convoy of about 100 vehicles took to the streets of downtown Edmonton today. The event was held to try to create action on missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and men. APTN's Chris Stewart was there and has this report.
I don't know about you, but I fear for my children. I fear for my grandchildren. Yes.
Called the Convoy for Action, it brought a crowd to Borden Park in Edmonton. The convoy was held to ask Canadians to push for the 231 calls to action from the final report from the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry, which was released 1 year ago. April Eve Weiberg is the founder of the Stolen Brothers and Sisters Awareness Movement and one of the organizers of the convoy.
Our goal is to get into the hearts and minds of our fellow Canadians to make a commitment and, join us as we address the 231 recommendations.
She is hoping each Canadian will do their part to help.
Even if you do just one of those calls for justice, that it's important to many, many people, and sadly, even in the midst of a global pandemic, our people, our Indigenous people, continue to be disproportionately murdered, going missing, or being exploited, and that needs to be addressed today.
Supporters here know personally the loss of a loved one.
I'm here to support my sisters. This fight is real. It's close to my heart.
Weiberg spoke to the crowd, telling them more work against racism needs to be done.
Our dignity and our respect is denied. Denied when we walk into a grocery store, denied when we walk into a bank. I am tired of being discriminated against.
And then the cars began the journey down Jasper Avenue and past the legislature, honking their horns, letting Edmonton know that their fight is not over. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
Still to come, we sit down with Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett to discuss the MMIWG anniversary. That after this quick break. Here is Thursday's weather forecast beginning on the East Coast. 21 above in Charlottetown, 20 in Halifax, 4 degrees in Nain, 15 in La Grande River, sunny skies and 26 in Montreal, 23 in St. Jovi, sunny skies in Ontario, 19 above in Toronto and London, 22 in Timmins, 25 in Elliott Lake, in northern Manitoba, 0 in Churchill, 12 above in God's Lake, sunny skies and 25 in Gimli, 27 above in Winnipeg, in Saskatchewan, 21 degrees in Yorkton, 25 in Estevan, 12 degrees in rain in La Ronge, and in Buffalo Narrows. Welcome back. It has been just one day since video of a violent arrest in a small Nunavut community was released. Now, a diverse group of voices are calling for the territory's law enforcement to wear body cameras. Kent Driscoll brings us this update.
This video was taken late night on the 1st of June in Kinnight, Nunavut, the community previously known as Cape Dorset. An RCMP press release says this man was intoxicated and fighting people. The RCMP came to arrest him. Here's what happened. Dropped to the ground by the truck door, the man is then swarmed by 5 police officers. That's the majority of the officers stationed in Kinnight. The response? The officer driving the truck has been moved to desk duty, and an outside police force is investigating. Kenny Bell is the mayor of Iqaluit, and he's also the president of the Nunavut Association of Municipalities. He's called for both organizations to vote on a motion supporting body cameras for Nunavut police.
There's so much mistrust here, and it's generational mistrust, that we have to do something to correct that. And I think having a video of situations from the police's perspective, that is a government a document, basically, government video, I think that will help bridge that trust and start on a better foot moving forward.
A broad political coalition has been growing once this video came to light. Nunavut Justice Minister Jeannie Halawak called for and is receiving an investigation into the arrest. Nunavut's Conservative Senator and NDP MP have both called for body cameras for police. Bell saw the video, just like the rest of the territory. He thinks it supports the call for cameras.
He couldn't walk. You could see that very clearly in the video, and I don't know what happened beforehand, and I don't know what the whole interaction was, but from the video alone, that police officer shouldn't be a police officer.
The investigation into this arrest will be the 6th such investigation launched into the Nunavut RCMP this year. A growing consensus is asking for RCMP to wear body cameras while working. Body cameras aren't foolproof or tamper-proof, but Nunavut's politicians are saying it sure beats citizens having to record the RCMP themselves. And when those citizen videos look like this, that call is going to be hard to ignore. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
We return now to our coverage of the one-year anniversary of the release of the MMIWG final report. APTN's Brett Forrester is on Parliament Hill for an exclusive interview with the Crown Indigenous Relations Minister.
Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations Carolyn Bennett joins me here outside the House of Commons amid the COVID-19 pandemic, which has delayed the delivery of a national action plan dealing with missing and murdered Indigenous women in Canada on the one-year anniversary of the final report. Minister, thanks for joining me. A year ago, the Prime Minister accepted the finding that what happened was genocide, but that's not exactly what the inquiry said. The report said what happened is genocide and is happening. How ready are you to admit that today?
Well, I think that what we've accepted the report, and we are working on that, and what we have to do is work every day to stop this national tragedy where Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit and gender diverse people are dying. So we need, and that's what the families have asked us. I mean, today and in this week, this horrible week, we have to accept the racism that is inherent in colonization is something that every Canadian needs to actually commit to speaking out against and changing that way that Indigenous people are received in Canada.
But is it genocide?
I think that, again, we received the report. I think that it's really important that for my job, we have to look forward.
Okay, there was a statement put out this morning by the commissioners. They really panned your government's lack of action this past year. They're telling families to seek outside assistance and oversight. How do you respond?
Well, I think that because this was the first national public inquiry, it requires all provinces and territories, all Indigenous governments, everyone to respond, and that's what we've been able to do. And I think that they did compliment the Yukon government and the real collaboration that's happening there. This is an example for all of the provinces and territories going forward, and we look forward to lifting up those promising and proven practices as we develop the National Action Plan together.
I want to ask you, how urgently have you been drafting this National Action Plan over the last year? and how much of it is done? 50%, 60%, where are we and when can you see it?
Well, I think that you'll see on the website today that the contributions from MCIVOR, from Paututik, NWAC are there, and that we now need to work with them and the provinces and territories for us to be able to, having gathered their input, to now be able to work towards a national action plan. We will not let the families and survivors down. We will get this done.
The Prime Minister put out a statement today, but the families are responding, saying there really hasn't been enough consultation with them and with people at the grassroots level. What's your message to the families? What's your message to people who are feeling left out right now?
I had a really good conversation with the Manitoba Coalition this morning, and I think that it was important to hear directly from them. I think the funding that was given to NWAC and Paututik and MCIVOR, Autochtone, that they have been working to actually engage with families, and I think that certainly the gatherings that happened with MCIVOR and Paututik have delivered a very strong advice that included families and survivors.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there for today. I want to thank you for doing this, Minister Bennett. This is Brett Forster for APTN National News in Ottawa. Back to you in Winnipeg.
It's time for another quick break, but first here is the rest of Thursday's weather forecast. Here's the rest of Thursday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. 16 in rain in Grand Prairie, 15 above in Peace River, 17 with a mix of sun and cloud in Red Deer, 16 in Lethbridge. Over to the west coast, 21 in Kamloops, 17 in Campbell River, 15 and cloudy in Smithers, 12 above in Prince Rupert. In the Yukon, sunny skies and 12 in Rock River, 16 in Old Crow. Over to the NWT, 13 above in Yellowknife, 18 in Trout Lake, sunny skies and 15 in Inuvik, 9 above in Colville Lake. In Nunavut, 0 degrees in Baker Lake and Arviat, 2 above in Iqaluit, and 2 in Dorset. Welcome back. Before we leave you tonight, there is word of a bison baby boom at Banff National Park. These calves, following their mothers, were captured by remote wildlife cameras. At least 10 more calves were born this spring. Parks Canada says they all appear to be healthy. 16 bison were reintroduced in 2017, nearly a century after they disappeared from the wild. They were brought from Elk Island National Park, east of Edmonton, and released from a holding corral in 2018. It's believed the herd now has at least 45 members. That's your APTN National News for this Wednesday. You can find more news relating to the one-year anniversary of the National Inquiry's final report on our website at aptnnews.ca. You can also follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Indigenous news. I'm Brittany Hobson. Have a great evening.